Yeah. And thank you, Team AVPRAF. I have been following both the earlier sessions with great interest, and I found both sessions quite pertinent in the sense that there was a lot of information which probably may be new for the participants of the program today. So my presentation would be sort of taking up from both these sessions because there are certain connectivities with the earlier, whatever the earlier speakers have spoken about. So I have been working as a public health researcher, though I am deeply rooted in Ayush. I have been working as a public health researcher in several projects of different natures, but my passion definitely lies with Ayush. And when this invite came to speak, and the topic was given as pandemics and Ayush, I was very clear that I am not going to speak on the clinical efficacy of Ayurveda as a medical discipline in handling this sort of a pandemic because as an Ayurvedic practitioner, you know the strength of Ayurveda, you know the potential of Ayurveda. Also, there are adequately good number of speakers who are Ayurvedic scholars who can speak proficiently on the subject. So I was thinking as to what should I speak about. So of the late, I have been working on health systems strengthening sort of projects. So I've been trying to understand the concept of a health system and how what needs to be done to strengthen it and how a health system approach is very important in handling major public health concerns, communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, national programs, and so on. Hence, today my speech will basically focus on applying this particular lens of health system to the okay. So I'll move on to my presentation. Basically, what I'm trying to do today is to talk about health systems per se. This may be a new topic for you by in itself, and there are a lot of technical words that are used in my presentation. So what I want to right away say that is do not get enamored or do not get overwhelmed with the presentation. I'll try to make it as simplistic as possible. What I want to basically present before the audience today is that there is a certain approach that is adopted from a global and a national health point of view, and we should be aware of this sort of an approach. And it is good for us to understand that if we look at our own system through this approach, what is it that we see? So without further delay, let me get into the topic. So my topic is titled as Pandemic Preparedness of Ayush, a Health Systems View. And the outline of today's talk would be basically, I will begin by giving an introduction to the health systems. What is health system? And then I will try to talk on how epidemics per se have an influence or an impact on health systems. Thereafter, I will try to talk on how health systems generally are being assessed to understand their level of preparedness for epidemics, handling epidemics. So just a short while ago, if we remember, Dr. Geeta Krishnan was quite strongly stressing on this particular point that more than anything else, it is the preparedness that we are lacking in. So I find it quite timely that he gave those interjunctions, and this resonates very well with my presentation. And finally, we will try to see that while applying this sort of an assessment lens, can we look at Ayush also parallelly and see if there is anything that is emerging out from this. So this is going to be the gist of my talk. So we begin with the definition of health systems. We have been hearing about health systems for quite a long time, and we have our own interpretation of health systems. We have been reading it on print media, social media, that the health system is weak, the health system needs to be stronger. So we have seen all this. So we may have our own understanding of health system, but what is the actual definition of health system? The WHO definition is what is being shown here. It says that health system per se means all organizations, people, and actions. So there are these three vital components. Organizations here means institutions, physical institutions. People mean they could be ministers, they could be policymakers, they could be health workers, all sorts of people who are a part of the health system. And actions could be in the form of a policy, a guidance, an advisory, a program, all sorts of services that are provided through the health sector. So when the organizations, people, and actions work collectively together, or their independent actions are interdependent on each other to give a final outcome of either promoting, restoring, and maintaining health. This whole gamut of functions collectively together is called as the health system. So this is the health system. And what is the responsibility of a health system? Basically, the health system has these following responsibilities. One is that it is organized. Why is it organized? It is essentially organized basically to achieve the outcome of improving health status and also understanding, identifying threats. So identify, forecast and identify threats which are going to be inimical to its own population base to which it serves. And once you have identified the threat, how can you defend the population against that threat? And then, and when ill health sets in on the population, so there are different kinds of illnesses. We all know we have different categories of illnesses. We have acute, we have chronic illnesses, and illnesses require intervention. So you may have different types of intervention. You may have an OPD level intervention where you just go to the clinic, collect medicines, and come back after a consultation. You may have hospitalization, you may require surgery, or you may require long-term rehabilitation or palliative sort of care. So all these kind of interventions or treatment modalities will have financial consequences, which means the person affected by this illness will have to bear a certain amount of financial expenditure. Now we know in a country like India and many third world developing nations, you have a wide disparity in the socio-economic classes. And so illness means different things for different people. So for an upper middle class person, illness means an opportunity to utilize the scope provided by his insurance coverage, whereas for a below poverty line person, an illness may mean an out of pocket expenditure for which he may have to borrow, he may have to, sort of sell his land, and this will in turn push his family back into the gamut of poverty. So basically, a health system should think about this and should ensure what are the measures available to protect its citizens against these untoward or unwanted financial consequences. And next is to provide equitable access. Now, many of you have heard the word equity. So what do you mean by equity? Equity means irrespective of your socio-economic status, irrespective of your community, creed, caste, or religion, you have equal access. You have equal access to all the resources that the health system has planned or put in place for its population. So there is no discrimination here. This is the equity element of it. So a good health system should basically be equitable. And then there should be a community participation. Now, what do you mean by this? This basically means that decisions are not made from top to down. So basically, this is what happens in countries. And we see in many nations, all the decisions are taken at the apex level. Apex level means the ministry or the government or the major organizations who are involved in the policy planning. And their decisions are thereafter just implemented downwards onto the states and to the districts and to the taluks and to the sub-village level. So this is a vertical top-to-down approach. A good health system will incorporate an element of community participation wherein there is a feedback sought from the community or the population to which the services are being provided. Okay, so this is the responsibilities of the health system. Now I move on to the health system organization. So we see that we already talked that health system includes organizations, individuals, and services. So the WHO gives a framework now to understand the health system, because we see that it is basically a lot of functions that are happening within a health system, and there is a coordination between these functions. There is a sort of interconnectivity between these functions. So what are these organizational levels? So the WHO calls this as the health system framework, and it calls this as the system building blocks. That means the health system, the various elements of the health system have been collectively organized under 6 different building blocks. So these building blocks are namely service delivery, health workforce, information, medical products, vaccines and technologies, financing, leadership and governance. So now we heard in Dr. Geeta Krishnan's presentation a few of these terminologies. We are a bit familiar now. However, I will still explain. And these collectively, these building blocks collectively improve access to coverage, work together to improve quality and safety of health services so that overall the goals and outcomes that come out are improved health. Responsiveness. Responsiveness means the health system is alert to emergencies and to requirements of the people, is sensitive to the need of the population and acts accordingly. social and financial risk protection, which means again what I discussed earlier, the population needs to be protected from financial expenditure that they may have to incur during an episode of illness. So we have these government sponsored insurance schemes. We had the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. Now we have the Prime Minister's insurance scheme. We have several state schemes. Improved efficiency, which means the health system listens to the needs of the people. It gives services which are of high quality and is alert to the requirements of the population. Now, decoding the building blocks. Now we have these names here. How do we understand them? What do you mean by leadership and governance? So leadership here basically implies the political leadership of the country, policymakers, people within the Niti Aayog and the ministry themselves, implementers. So once the policy is made, once the policy guidelines are laid out, who has to implement them? At the state level, you have the National Health Mission Director, and then under him you have various program deputy directors, joint directors. Then you have the program managers. Then you have the health authorities themselves who work on the ground. You may have the district health officer. You may have the district medical officer. You may have the primary healthcare center charge medical officer. So all these health authorities, all these constituents are the people who are involved in the planning, execution and implementation of this policy. So their function is to formulate policies and see the strategy and direction of the health sector. Where should our health sector be focusing upon? And what is the kind of regulation and accountability that is in place for the health? What are the rules and regulations that you have to make organizations accountable for their actions within the health sector? What kind of regulations you have in place? And how do you allocate funding? Okay, so who decides on how much fund has to be given for what kind of an activity? Then the health information systems. Health information systems is basically an aggregation of data that you're collecting from the ground through different methods. You use household surveys, you use the civil registration systems like the census, you have the DLHS, which is the district level household surveys, then you have the national family health welfare surveys, then you have different kinds of epidemiological surveillance tool. Vinayak talked about surveillance. What do you mean by surveillance? Surveillance basically means consistently monitoring diseases, communicable diseases, which have the potential to break into epidemics or which have the potential to have multiple episodes of outbreaks in a calendar year. So that is a consistent monitoring that we call as surveillance. So what happens as a function within the health information system is the database that is created by the aggregation of all this data basically gives trends. It gives indicators of health system performance. How is the health system performing in relation to these kind of conditions or these kind of programs? What is the information on resources? How many health workers you have? How many health facilities you have? What is the kind of budget that is available? These are all the resources. Coverage of services. Do we have infrastructure across all the districts in the state? And within the districts, do we have coverage across the taluks? At the village level, what is the kind of infrastructure that is available? How many health resources are available? So that kind of database which is available to the nation, that is the health information system. Then we have the financing element. The financing element means what is the financial capital available to the nation. So for health sector, okay. So the health sector here means the whole ministry and its apparatus that performs the health functions for the population of the country. So what is the budget that is there from the national general budget that is given as a health budget? And then what is the external kind of money that comes? You have funding agencies. You see there are global funding agencies like the World Bank, you have the International Monetary Fund, you have the USAID, and you have private agencies like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and several other agencies which give you grants and aids. So the function of the health financing building block is to see whether there is sufficient fund available, and if the fund is not available, then how can you pool different kind of financial resources together to protect your population group from financial risk. Then we look into the workforce. So workforce is quite simple. You can understand what you mean by workforce. Workforce basically means all people who are involved in the execution of health services. So you have people right from the top and people on the ground like the ASHA worker, the multi-purpose health worker. You have the doctors, you have the professionals, you have the nurses, you have the ANMs who are working on the hospital level. So you have all these kind of workers, and what they do, what is the function here is to see that they are available in sufficient numbers across the state, and they are evenly distributed across various geographical regions, and they are working collectively together in the best possible manner to achieve the best health outcomes. Then the fifth unit is the medical products, vaccines and technologies. Here, this is also sort of self-explanatory. You are talking about here medicines, both essential medicines and emergency medicines. You are talking about vaccines. You are talking about diagnostic capability that is available within the nation. And you're also talking about health technologies, like the, different kind of artificial intelligence that is being used to produce data favorable for planning and forecasting. So here the function is to ensure that these medical products and vaccines are equitably available across the country, so that there can be an assurance of quality, safety, and cost effectiveness. So that service that you get is of a high quality, it is safe, and it is cost effective. And finally, you have the service delivery. Service delivery here basically means health service delivery. So you're talking about the institutions which offer the services. You have the public and private sector, you have all the healthcare facilities, you have the levels of healthcare, you have primary level of healthcare, secondary level, tertiary level of healthcare, and the different modes of care, that is preventive care, curative care services, and promotive care services. So the objective here is to deliver effective, safe, and quality care, which can be personal. Personal means for an individual, and non-personal. Non-personal can be at the population level, like what is happening currently with the pandemic. So now we have a fair idea of what is the health system. At least you may have now a basic idea what you mean, what constitutes a health system. Now we can see what happens when an epidemic occurs. So what is the kind of impact an epidemic causes on the health system? So throughout the century, throughout the previous century, the 20th century, and currently in the 21st century, we are now dealing with several episodes of epidemics. So this is probably the first pandemic of this new century. So our experience with earlier epidemics has taught us that when an epidemic occurs, it happens suddenly, and quite often the health system is caught unprepared. So there are multiple ramifications on the health system. There are multiple repercussions on the health system. So let us see through the building blocks itself what kind of impact happens on the health system. The first and major impact happens on the service delivery part of it. So when an epidemic happens, you have large numbers of people getting affected, and they need care. They need a lot of intensive care in most cases. So you need, what you see is, you see a lot of a rise in hospital admissions. You see people coming and thronging to the hospitals. So what happens? Hospital beds are occupied, and sometimes you have shortages of beds. So you see a surge in hospital admissions, but you do not see hospitals prepared, or you do not see a sort of planning that is being done by the health planners to ensure that that much intake is possible. So this immediately affects care, provision of care. Then you can see that what happens, the whole focus completely shifts on the epidemic. So the whole health system, all the doctors, all the nurses, all the staff are given only one sort of directive. Now focus completely on the pandemic. See what you can do with regard to the pandemic. Can you do contact tracing? Can you do quarantining? How can you help with all these testings? So this is very visible with the COVID-19 pandemic too. So what happens is all the other services which generally are offered through the health system, that promotive health services, preventive health services, or services for other segments of the population, like non-communicable diseases, other communicable diseases like tuberculosis, HIV, malaria, etc., are completely disrupted because you don't see clinics or OPDs running to provide those services. Everything is shut down and the whole focus is here. Then what happens in this scenario? There are vulnerable populations. You can see people who are on the lower margins of the society, like urban slum workers or the tribal population. So they lose their access. So if there was a center which was already functioning earlier, to which they had access to get healthcare services, sometimes those centers are no more functioning, or they are not providing the kind of services that they require. So the vulnerable populations are hit first. Then within the medicines, vaccines, and technology unit, you can see that there are quite often drug shortages. So there is a huge demand for drugs. Sometimes you don't even have the drug ready. You don't even know what drug. We see we are struggling with it now. Like Dr. Geeta Krishnan said, it is not based on scientific evidence that is the drug is currently being used. It's just based on probability. HCQ. You saw he talked about HCQ and remdesivir. Certain trials are being done, but they also have not been very conclusive to say that this drug is absolutely going to work in this condition. So it is a lot of probability. So, when you think that this drug may work, sometimes you don't have the requisite number of the drug. Or you may have drugs stocked, but you don't have it adequate enough to distribute across the nation. So drug shortage is a major thing. Health financing. So if you had external donors who are contributing to different kinds of programs, like for example, you had the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation who was funding your HIV program here, or you had the USAID who was funding your tuberculosis program. Suddenly, because of the COVID pandemic, everybody is excited about COVID. Then the funders now also want to focus on COVID. So they do not want to now continue the current grant, or they put a moratorium on the grant, or they temporarily pause it. So what happens is your programs which are running here are also temporarily paused. You don't have the money, so you can't pay the people who are doing that program, and so the program gets affected. And finally, who is affected? The patients who are beneficiaries of that program. So there you have a big major impact. And diversion of national health budgets. This happens nationally also. You have a health budget, you have already budgeted across lines for different things, but now the COVID has come, so you have to pool all the money that is available and you have to put it for the COVID kind of thing. So this usually happens. Health information. So every system now has health information. Every nation has health information systems now inbuilt. The quality may differ across, but definitely there are health information systems now that are available. There are databases within nations to report what kind of conditions are generally seen in that country and what is the disease burden level in that country. Now, if you have a particular surveillance system that is already monitoring certain infectious diseases, and now a novel infection, like what happened with the novel coronavirus infection has happened. So you have different kinds of clinical symptoms that are being seen. And your current surveillance system is not actually capturing those requisite symptoms that you need now to capture. It was not capturing it earlier. So you may have to adapt your surveillance system. You may have to bring in those elements that allow those data to enter into that database and take it up. So whether your system or your database or your technology platform that you're using is good enough or capable enough to offer that sort of a dynamism and flexibility is an important thing to be thought over. And real-time reporting, whether your information systems have the capacity to actually capture data right away as it is happening. That is, if you have certain new cases being detected, real-time monitoring that is being given to you, that today we had 18 cases positive and there were 3 deaths. Do you have real-time reporting available for you to make quick decisions? That is also a challenge for health information systems during epidemics. And finally, on the workforce, you may have reduced workforce. You see, people may get scared. The workers, health workers themselves, or health professionals like doctors, nurses, they may themselves be worried about risk of exposure to this kind of an epidemic. So they may themselves make themselves absent from work, though the government may force them to join duty. But it's quite possible that many, at least 10 to 20% of the workforce may indulge in absenteeism. They may not report for duty. And secondly, there is sort of fatality. Because of working in those kind of dangerous environments, they may get infected and they may even die, and there may be other complications that may happen to the workforce. And there is a diversion. Suppose there were certain doctors who were basically kept for tuberculosis treatment under a certain program in these kind of district hospitals or the primary healthcare hospitals. They are now being asked to focus their entire sort of attention to the epidemic alone. Then lack of training and preparedness. Though doctors may be pushed to the program, they may not be prepared, they may not be trained, they may not know how exactly it is to handle patient, because it's an emergency situation. They are pulled into the field from day one. So sometimes the governments or the ministries are not able to give in quick time that sort of training and preparedness. They most often learn on the job, because the understanding of the disease keeps changing. So the guidelines by the government also change, and the sort of training or recommendations that are given to the workforce also changes. So there is this challenge here. So I am trying to exponentiate on this challenge, the previous slides, by telling you a case study. All of you are aware of the Ebola epidemic which occurred in West Africa. There were 3 countries which were affected. It started in December 2014 in a nation called as Guinea, or Guinea, however you may pronounce it, and slowly across the next 3 months spread to 2 other countries, Liberia and Sierra Leone. The health systems in these countries were very much underprepared to deal with an epidemic of this gravity. So I have gone across certain publications, and the data I'm sharing with you, this is the kind of impact that happened. It is clearly visible here. So what happened is, with the health service delivery, we told that essential services are being affected. So this is what exactly happened there. Immunization coverage for infants, for children below 1 year, what was the necessary immunization to be provided? that was hampered. People were not available to provide immunizations, 50% of reduction coverage. Then the TB centers, which were providing directly observed treatment strategy, medications, they closed down in many districts because people were directed to deal with the Ebola epidemic. Then for malaria prevention and control, the sort of outreach, that is the health workers used to go to the community, used to do the screening, used to give medicines, and used to spread messages for adopting preventive behavior, that also stopped. Supplementary nutrition program which was given to the undernourished or malnourished children in Western Africa, you have a lot of cases of severe acute malnutrition and moderate malnutrition. So you have the SAM cases. So there is a nutrition program in place that was affected, and major surgeries which were required, like the obstetric surgeries and hernia. Such surgeries also got affected because you did not have surgeons reporting in the hospitals for doing those surgeries. And you see with the medicines, there was a stock out of HIV drugs and they could not be replenished back because the health sector was completely focused on Ebola. They forgot about HIV at that moment. Health information systems. So the surveillance system for other infectious diseases got hampered because surveillance stopped. So it became bare minimum and the focus was only on Ebola again here. And limited health system data was being collected at the district level. So for other programs, data was not being collected at that point. And health workforce, you see, almost 513 doctors, nurses, and midwives died in Sierra Leone, which is equivalent to 1.07 percentage of their health workforce. Whereas in Liberia, a very higher percentage, 8.07, and 1.45 in Guinea, uh, perished due to the exposure to the illness or due to the lack of protective equipment available to them. And we also saw a reduction of healthcare workers in these countries from ranging from 8% to 23% because of deaths, because of absenteeism, and because of various other causes. They were not available on the front line to serve the population. So now I'm going to see, how is, there is a method that the WHO, World Health Organization, uses to assess countries and their health systems. So there are different, they use certain toolkits. So these slides, the forthcoming slides that I'm going to share now, basically have drawn from that WHO toolkit. So there is a specific toolkit that is available for assessing the health system capacity for crisis management in several nations. Initially, this toolkit was designed for the member nations of WHO from the European Union, but now it is being universally applied. So this is a guidance document that is being used by WHO to allow member nations to implement themselves within their nations to check on their own health systems and see how the health system is adequately prepared or not. So we are going to go through each building block individually here through the toolkit. So please again do not feel overwhelmed with the technical terms that I used here. I will try to make it quite simple here. Basically what is happening is with leadership and governance, we have understood what is leadership and governance. We have seen in previous slides what are the components of leadership, who are the people, and what is the function. Now we are trying to see for a leadership and governance preparedness, what are the key components that are required? What is essential components that should be there to say that leadership is prepared to deal with crisis management. So there are 2 or 3 sections here. One is on the legal frameworks. That means you should have framework. Framework here means basically policies, plans, and procedures. You must have policies and plans that allow multi-sectoral engagement in an emergency and specific health sector engagement. Now, when I say multi-sectoral, for those who are not very familiar with this term, what I would like to say here is that we understand that in a disaster or in an epidemic, there are several implications. One, of course, the health of the population is directly impacted. There can be deaths, there can be morbidities. But apart from that, there are other implications like there is loss of employment, loss of wages. So there is sort of nutritional status of the population is affected. Financial security of households are compromised. Then, there is stigmatization. Several groups are targeted. Several several populations start migrating away. So there is displacement. So you see, all these kind of problems cannot be solved by the health sector alone. So you require the other relevant sectors to come in. You may require the sector of agriculture to come in. You may require the sector of, sort of industry to pitch in here. You may require other sectors to come in. So this is what is meant by multi-sector. So emergency management is generally always multi-sectoral. And of course, you must have very specific laws for health sector. So you must have laws which allows health sector to interface with other sectors to give comprehensive sort of, a sort of service for the population. Also, and you must have procedures by which they can do that. There must be clear guidelines on how one sector can engage with the other. And similarly, for the health sector, you must have very specific guidelines that within the health sector, what are the functions that are to be done in an emergency. Then you should have institutional frameworks. Institutional frameworks here mean that basically you should have institutions. You should have physical institutions available. And within the institutions, you should have groups which work towards this. So you can see here with the multi-sector and health sector, I have written here the national committees. You should have committees, and you should have a group or an organization, a national operational entity at the apex, which looks oversees coordination and partnership building across the nation at the state level, at the district level, and at the sub-district level. Right. And then there should be national program wherein within the national programs we have you are aware of national programs. We have different kinds of national programs. You must have heard we have the reproductive and child health national program. We have the program on tuberculosis. We have the program on non-communicable diseases. We have the program on communicable diseases. So we have different kinds of national programs. Within national programs, there must be an element which talks about emergency management, how this program can be affected in the event of an emergency, and what should be done, what are the guidelines to deal with that sort of a scenario. How can this emergency be management without directly impacting the effect or reach of this program. So you need these kind of things. You may need plans, you may need research and evidence base. So this is the tool that is being applied for leadership and governance. And how is this tool being assessed? Basically what you're doing is you have indicators to check whether this is in place or not. So you have seen these key components, and within the key components, these are the essential requirements. So how do you see whether this requirement is available or not? You have certain indicators to assess them. And for evaluating that indicator, you have a set of questions. This is what I mean by indicator determinant queries. So you have a set of questions, and these questions are asked at sites. Assessment happens when teams go to various sites within the nation. They see the health system. They go to different states. They go to different districts. They see how the health system is performing. They go to the hospitals. They go to the private, primary healthcare facilities. They meet the people over there, talk, and do surveys and evaluate. So they ask these questions and they use the indicators there. So this is what is meant by indicator determinant queries. Now let us take this particular component and let us now try to see from an Ayush perspective. Now, when I say Ayush is completely, you have these different disciplines now within Ayush. So it may be difficult to judge all together on one scale. Let me take only Ayurveda because we are also essentially an Ayurveda crowd over here. So let us see whether these kind of things are available within Ayurveda as it is as a system. Do we have a representation or a legal framework that allows us to be involved in a multi-sectoral emergency management? We do not have, because we do not find a mention or a sort of presence within the emergency scenario. So if you look at these individual things that I have listed out here, you can easily see that there are no legal frameworks or there are no institutional frameworks in relation to emergency management wherein Ayush systems or Ayurveda per se is even mentioned or even being talked about as a sort of a discipline that can be allowed for engagement. Currently not there on the policy. However, we have seen with the recent COVID-19 pandemic that the ministry has been pushing. The government of India has been pushing to strengthen Ayush contribution to the management of the disease. So this is a push by the government. Right now, it is not there architecturally within the policy framework, but the government is now overzealous in pushing it and strengthening this sort of an environment. So we have the advisories, and we have sort of recently the Ministry of Ayush Secretary Rajesh Kotecha has asked for request for proposals for conducting clinical studies on generating evidence for clinical efficacy of Ayurveda. So now I go to the next health workforce. Basically, you are looking here whether you have the health resources for health sector emergency management. So here, when you say health resources, you need workers, all sorts of workers from professionals to the ground level field workers. So what is the kind of training and education you're going to give them? Do you have training and education programs in place for them to understand emergency management? and what kind of repeater programs you have, development of these human resources that you have there in place. So in Ayush, you do have certain, in this you can find that in the Ayurveda segment or Ayush segment, you do have training and education programs. Now even some sort of national program training has been sought to be brought in, and I think in some segments there is a sort of minimal training that is being offered to Ayush who work under the National Health Mission, Ayush physicians. But again, with emergency management, right now, I think to the best of my information, this is still a big void. So this is a gap that needs to be addressed. We come to the products, vaccines and technology. We are looking here at what are the supplies available. Do you have adequate equipment and supplies for pre-hospital and hospital, which means, pre-hospital basically means at, domestic level. That means a patient can go to a OPD center, consult and come back. So this is pre-hospital. And wherever hospitalization is required, do you have requisite stock of medicines? Do you have all other equipments like ventilators, oxygen masks, and other equipments? Do you have the lab technologies available? Do you have labs available? Do you have lab technicians available? Then do you have the pharmaceutical services? That means, do you have medicines disposal and indenting and stocking kind of facility available at the district level? Do you have blood banks? Do you have blood transfusion units available at each level? And so here, when I look again, take up the lens to look at Ayush, you can see that there is a shortage of Ayush. I mean, those who have looked at the data from the Ayush Ministry website, you can see there are shortages of Ayush physicians in the public sector, wherein Ayush people are being posted to perform within. But now I think the government is actively trying to, recruit people. So there is a shortage which is now being addressed. Pharmaceutical services, laboratory services, blood services, this is truly a question mark. At many places you have different kind of states and different kind of health systems. So you have states like Kerala which are very well performing, and you have states like Bihar, Jharkhand, where the system is very weak. So you have a big sort of disparity with regard to this. Now we come to the fourth. This is the health information. So we are talking about databases here. Do you have a national health information system? Do you have surveillance system? Do you have emergency reporting system? Do you have a strategy for communicating risk with the public and media? I think right now Ayush does not represent anywhere in this kind of a tool currently for the emergency management, because this is basically tailored for the emergency management. Here Ayush certainly does not have a representation as of now. We come to the financing part. Do you have finance available for emergency preparedness? Usually in health budgets, you have a component that is kept aside for emergency management. So you have these disaster management, funds available. You have the authority, and you have the funds that is kept earmarked, and you have a financing mechanism for the health sector. With the second part, with the health sector financing mechanisms, I think Ayush is now catching upon, whereas in the first segment, you do not have that representation with respect to Ayush. And finally, we talk about the last is the service delivery. So a very important, section here and building block. We are talking about the response plan for emergencies. We are talking about medical operations that are in place. So I think this is very clearly visible here. If you see this slide here, that there are many gaps with regard to Ayurveda or the Ayush system of medicine. We may have our representation with the regular services like the prevention and control of mother and child programs. We have an element within the chronic and non-communicable diseases. So we have certain representations here, but whereas with the other important like response capacity, management of hospitals in mass casualty, we are not represented. Basically, I don't want to blame the system. I only want to say that this is the current scenario. We do not have a representation over it. Right. So this was an effort from my side because this is a topic that I am quite interested in. So I was trying when this request came for me to present. I was thinking, what should I present? So I just this is an effort by my side to see how can you apply a lens. Now there is another aspect of this. So this talk is not to make all of us despondent or gloomy. I have only used one particular lens. The reality there on the other side is also there that you have governments. I mean, you have the government which is really promoting the system aggressively, and it is a good time. This is a very exciting time for Ayush and Ayurveda. And now we have this sort of evidence base that is being generated. And Dr. Geeta Krishnan very clearly told about the steps taken by Ayush. So as of now, this is the current scenario and this is the current application of this lens. We hope that over a period of time, we have better representation in these areas and we can say ourselves to be a stand-alone health system which is able to, deal with an emergency situation, at least for the future. Our learnings currently will help us to augment our future response. So thank you, everybody. I'm open for questions. I know that I have exceeded a bit of my time. My sincere apologies because I wanted to go a little slow. This is a very technical topic. I hope you have been able to understand. Please feel free to ask me questions.
Um, how much pharma companies has influences on WHO? That's the question.
I may not be the right person to talk about this because you have somebody from WHO here as an expert presenter. He just presented before me. I think this question, he is much more well informed to talk on this. My information on this is scattered.
Somebody says it was very clear. The presentation was really clear.
Thank you very
So that
much.
was to you, sir. So we are also getting some messages on the WhatsApp. It was excellent presentation. So we thought
Thank
this.
you.
Next is again Dr. Ashutosh says very informative and the reality. So, we are running late, so if the questions are there, kindly post it
Okay,
very
do,
soon.
do my fellow presenters, Dr. Vinayak, Shri Geeta Krishnan ji or Rajiv Vasudevan ji, do they have anything to add on to what I say?
I don't think Dr. Geeta Krishnan sir is in the session right now. Maybe others. Uh, um, yes. How to develop an emergency educational program at the national level from your point of view?
Okay, that's a good question. See, for that, it is important to identify what is the sort of role that this particular system can play in an emergency scenario. Right now, if you see the directories or advisory that has been issued by the ministry, it was primarily on the promotive aspect and health promotion and prevention. So this was the first, I mean, sort of advisory that came. So you had a long list of practices that is a part of the Dinacharya routine that was advised to the population to be adapted. So basically, it is important for the ministry per se to position itself, or for the sort of the team that the leadership or governance team with regard to Ayush in general and with Ayurveda in particular, to understand or position as to what exactly is the sort of stand that you want to take as a discipline. Do you want to say that basically we are only looking, or we are capable of only providing the promotive and preventive sort of a role, or we can actually enter into the curative domain? And if you want to say that you are entering into the curative domain, what is the kind of backup or evidence that you have to show that? So really, this is a call at the leadership level, and then only you can talk about the guidelines next. So that is a corollary that comes after this process.
Can you talk to central planners? Is what Dr. Ashutosh wants to know
Central
from
planners,
you,
are
sir.
you, Ashutosh ji, are you asking whether Sareen, can talk to the central planners, or what is the question here?
Maybe he meant, would you be the right person to at least to have an can you communicate to them? Maybe that is what he meant.
Now, those who know the functioning of the system, understand that there are, how this happens is the ministry generally constitutes task forces, and then you have committees under the task force. Like currently for the COVID-19, also you have a task force that has been constituted, and within the task force there has been several committees. So there is a committee on epidemiology, there is a committee on drug development, there is a committee on research. So there are several committees, and these committees work with, again, subgroups to generate the evidence base. This is how the whole thing. And unfortunately, I am not a part of any such groups as of now. So in the current scenario, I don't think anybody is going to listen to me, and I am just an ordinary researcher.
Uh, next, I we see Dr. Vinayak Padikal. Okay. Yes, the health system's view is one important aspect. Any Ayurveda person should understand to work within the public health domain. Very well put, sir. That goes to
Well,
you.
thank you, Vinayak. And Vinayak, incidentally, is also my junior in TIS and a close friend. So I liked his presentation in the morning. He put a lot of pertinent things, and I think he understands the view that I have put here as a public health professional. So I agree with his thing that a health systems view is very important because generally we are trained as clinicians in Ayurveda, and we only look at the health service delivery part. We do not look it as a whole. But now it's a great blessing that we have a person, an active clinician like Dr. Geeta Krishnan, who is there, who represents our nation and our science in WHO. So hopefully these kind of things will change with the active involvement of a very active Secretary Ayush and a very knowledgeable person in WHO. We hope this synergy will help in the global improvement of Ayurveda standing.
Anything, Dr. Vinayak, anything you would like to add on to this? Because Dr. Sarin was asking if you would like to add anything to add on to this presentation or the whole questions or anything. Would you like to add? Because if you have made you the presenter, maybe you can come online and speak as well, sir. We have a very big question there. Can I have the question, sir? Should we sort of, the biggest, the lengthiest question? Can I have that first part?
Hey, hello,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Vinayak, sir, yes.
hello.
Hi.
Yes, sir.
Ha, so I was
Yes.
saying, Sarinatan is actually one of the few Ayurveda people who have a very good grasp on health system perspective. So I don't think I have no role to put on anything more to it. But I think this is something which we need to build upon on every Ayurveda community people to know things. We need to actually bring in the public health perspective to Ayurveda.
I think he lost the connectivity. Yes.
I see a question here from Dr. Rajiv Vasudevan.
Yes,
Quite
sir.
an interesting
Yes.
question. So he was asking about how to leverage these Ayush wellness centers, health and wellness centers that have now been, brought in. So thank you, sir. So here I have asked this question myself because what I see currently in the guidance document is basically a lot of the current mandate for these wellness centers. One is to talk about the nutritional element of it, promotive health part of it, the nutrition and other lifestyle practices, and there is a lot of emphasis that is being given on yoga. But this really does not do justice to the Ayurveda part of it. So what I was seeing is I was looking at the policy domain as to where there is an expression of application, implementation. So I saw in the 2017 National Health Policy document that the NCDs, the non-communicable diseases domain, has been earmarked. There is a particular line within the policy document which says that integrative healthcare from the Ayush disciplines should be seriously explored to deal with the non-communicable diseases. I think this is the first time in a policy document, a national health policy document, that this integrative healthcare with Ayush is being discussed. I do not remember seeing it in the 2002 or the 83 document. So I would really say that why not begin it right down at the lowest level from the wellness centers? Why should you need to break it? Why should you need to plan it only from the PHC level? In fact, the sub-center level, the health and wellness center level is the first available opportunity. And you can, in fact, think of, there are, look at Ayurveda community health workers, Ayush community health workers. In fact, that idea has already been discussed during the guidance stage of the document, but that is not really very well expressed within the document as it is. So my suggestion would be that look at these kind of algorithms on integrative healthcare that can be developed for select specific conditions. We could start with 2 or 3 NCDs which are highly prevalent, and we could look at how to develop these kind of algorithms for integrative healthcare that probably could be used as a template for scaling up en masse. It would take time, it would require certain evidence-based generation, but this activity actually could have begun at the wellness center level. So this is my immediate thoughts on it, sir.
Can we go to one more question, sir? Can we make a working group to implement these shifts? What do you think, sir?
Yes, we should, and why not? And I hope the Ministry of Ayush takes this into consideration. You know, they are the decision makers. We have people like Dr. Geeta Krishnan here today. I hope and I sincerely request them to use their good offices and their considerable knowledge and experience to, bring this to the attention of Ayush, because he was also talking about a public health program in Ayush, which is very, very heartening to hear that this kind of a thought is now coming within the Ayush discipline. Yes, we should have a working group. Yes. So I think I have exceeded my time and you need the break. Thank you, Chaitanya. Thank you, Sujit, for the team for being there. Thank you, Dr. Somit and the team of AVPRAF. And thank you all for a very, very patient hearing and all this support given. Thank you and good day.